is an honor to be here this evening, and I'm very excited to be in this room with all of this granite because it's almost a full circle experience from me being a designer when I started some 20 years ago. But before I really get started, I'd like everybody to put their hand in the air. Give it a little shake. Okay, cool. We can now say that we're all connected and we have all shaken hands with every single person in this room. I really am thrilled to be here and I want you to look around. It seems like everybody knows everybody, and if there's someone here that you haven't met, when I'm all done talking up here, I would love it if you could actually introduce yourself to somebody that you haven't met yet this evening. Within this network, there are a vast amount of opportunities. And with all of the people that we know within this network, it creates so many opportunities, so much support, and a vast amount of resources for all of us. About 18 months ago, my personal and my professional lives got flipped upside down. And it's because of this whole industry as an entirety, these resources, all of the support that we have here, that I was able to pursue one of my greatest dreams and go after the opportunity of becoming an author, a speaker, and from an interior designer focused on finishes and fixtures for my clients, I'm now taking the show on the road with the intention of being motivational, strategic, and ideally be able to serve as many of you here as possible. Some of you may be rolling your eyes, thinking that she's going to break into song about her emotional journey from burnt-out designer to born-again diva. And you're absolutely right. I totally am going to stand up here and tell you a couple stories of my life, because I learned so much in my transition from a designer to an author and now a speaker and a coach that I feel like I'd be doing you a great disservice if I didn't share some of what I learned with all of you here tonight. In the hopes that my stories inspire and motivate you to go after one of your greatest dreams with more passion, more pursuit, and more determination until you actually reach it. That being said, there are 4 key elements I'm going to touch on this evening. The first one, whoops, I'm a little behind on my slides, is understanding your limiting beliefs. The second one, I want you to learn how to awaken your driving force. What are you passionate about? Utilizing the power of the pause, something I didn't figure out until a few years ago. And then you take all of those 3 elements and you can embrace the energy of change in an effort to achieve your greatest dreams, one decision at a time. So the question is, what's holding you back? I believe that when we figure out what's holding us back and then we figure out what's driving us forward, it's just a matter of making a few strategic mindset shifts that can have a tremendous impact on the rest of your life. And I'm curious, how many people in here have ever gone through a major life change? Everybody. Can somebody give me an example of one? How about buying a house? Getting laid off from your job? Having a baby? Or before that, maybe getting married? Or maybe after that, getting divorced? All of the above. Yes, thank you. I'm talking faster than my prompter's going, so I'm just going to have to pause for just a second, and I thought there was going to be a little more audience participation, so help me out here as I keep going. You're very shy, I know. It's okay. My point is, whether we create opportunities of change on purpose or whether it's an unfortunate surprise, All of the things that we just talked about, very briefly, can cause us to change and shift in one way, shape, or form, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, financially, and sometimes physically. These events leave us with the responsibility of making a choice. We can either move forward and embrace it, or we can step back and stay quiet, sometimes where it's a little safer. We have to make a choice of whether we hold on to something or we figure out how to let it go. These choices can very often lead us into questioning our own life, and we are forced to pause and start to figure it all out again. What are you supposed to do next, you ask yourself? And sometimes the only time the answer comes is when we slow down and let it sink in. But before I get too far ahead of myself, and I'm not sure what's going on with my slide. Oh, I got too far ahead of myself. That happens all the time. Has anybody in here ever felt like you weren't enough? You weren't pretty enough. You weren't smart enough. You didn't have enough resources. You weren't fast enough, whatever it was. So you did a whole heck of a lot more to meet somebody else's expectations, like this lady over here. Or maybe you were told that you were too much. God, you're too loud, you're too intense, you work too much. So you did a lot less to meet somebody else's expectations. The dichotomy of that had me stuck when I was a little girl, because I thought I had to be perfect for everybody. I had these opposing insecurities of not being enough for some and being too much for others, so I changed who I was. I didn't realize I was perfectly fine, just the way I was, because I was trying to meet everybody else's expectations. I became the ever-changing chameleon, hence the Chameleon Diaries, leaving me stuck in the middle of a boatload of self-doubt with these layers and layers of insecurities and limiting beliefs. Not sure who I was really supposed to be at all. As I grew up, however, I thought that if I focused on all of the external factors of my life, like solving other people's problems and building other people's dream homes, that I thought I might not have to pay attention to the pain and the uncertainty that just kept growing inside. For years, I traveled down a path towards financial and materialistic success. I thought, hey, it's going to bring me lasting joy and true fulfillment, so much so that I even started my own business, which I absolutely loved. And I thought that that was going to be enough. And I thought that if I just worked harder, that pain would go away. But I didn't realize that I was being driven by a fear of failure. And even though this design path has brought me to all of you in this awesome network of opportunities, excuse me, I just lost my place. It turns out that the path that I was on wasn't really the ultimate path that my soul wanted me to be on. And I was unhappy, unfulfilled, and felt incredibly alone despite the amount of people I had around me. So when I woke up one day and barely recognized myself, and I was aching at this point in time on the inside from a repeated broken heart and the unhealthy demands of being overworked, undervalued, and completely burnt out, I realized I had lost my passion along the way, and I forgot what my dreams really were, because I'd become so focused, so intent on fulfilling other people's expectations, and had made their dreams far more important than my own. You see, I had made the decision to become an interior designer when I was 17 years old. Who in here is the same person that they were when they were in high school? Over 30 years ago, that's when I made that decision. And within that time frame between then and most recently, I never took the time to reassess what I really wanted, and I became a human doing rather than a human being. I kept going on this path, and I was exhausted, helping everybody else around me achieve their personal and their professional successes. I was too afraid to switch directions for far too long. I felt like I just had to keep proving myself to everybody else. I felt like I just had to keep meeting other people's expectations, and then it would be okay. Not realizing that I didn't need to prove anything to anybody, because the only expectations that ever really mattered were mine. Eventually, this fear of failure, this fear of changing, it caught up with me. I had been ignoring what I was really doing on all the external factors of my life, and in December of 2022, about 18 months ago, in both my professional and my personal lives, I had something happen that had me shifting completely. One morning, right before Christmas, I got an email from a client telling me I had become too expensive. He was canceling all of our contracts, and what that meant was that was severing 50% of our projected revenue for the following year. It was huge. The funny thing was, I hadn't raised my price on him in 4 years, so I don't know how I had become too expensive for him. The very next day, I'm not making this stuff up, I found out that the boyfriend I had had for 2.5 years had another girlfriend for 2.5 years. So within 24 hours, my entire world got flipped upside down, inside out, and I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to be doing. The shock of those back-to-back punches was the clearest message from the universe, and you can find all the other clear messages that I missed in the book. It was the clearest message from the universe that it was time that I stopped worrying about what everybody else was doing and started paying a lot more attention to what I was doing, who I was doing it with, and why I was doing any of it at all. My pivot point, my big aha moment of clarity happened in December of 2022. And that's when I finally heard my intuition talking to me loud enough, telling me to slow down and make some significant changes. So I listened. I paused for a hot minute, took inventory of my life, and that's when I started writing. I started writing the messy and vulnerable memories of my life. And the more I wrote, the more I started to see my patterns. We all have patterns. The more patterns I recognized as unhealthy and unstable, the more I was able to uncover the reason why I had gotten so flipped upside down and turned around in the first place. Within all the black, white, and gray stories that are now packed into this book that you're all going to want to buy a copy of at the end of the evening, my lessons started to reveal themselves. And those lessons led me to understanding what my limiting beliefs really were. And then they led me to the clarity that my driving force is not a fear of failure, but in fact, the desire to connect and contribute with others on a deeper, more meaningful level, like I hope to with you tonight. I made the decision to push through my self-doubt, mustered up an absolute ton of courage, and I started to embrace change in a way I had never done before, and went after my new dream with relentless pursuit. And that is when the deeper, more resonating reason came to light as to why I was even writing this darn book in the first place. My parents didn't understand. They just thought I was airing my dirty laundry. But no, there's a reason for it. I wasn't just writing it to heal myself. Partway through, I realized that I was writing this book for you. Because yes, it is a memoir, but it's also a guide to your own self-discovery. Because if I can connect with one of you in here tonight and show you the lessons and teach you the things that I learned to help you avoid the heartbreaking drama or even some of the professional chaos that I endured, then all of this is going to be worth it. Or if I could coach one of you on how to strategize your future path, then maybe you'll reach your dreams and goals a little bit faster than I am. I do wish that I could talk about all of the lessons I've learned on my own self-discovery journey, but we would be here till Sunday, and I know you're probably all wanting to go get another cocktail, so I'll be quick. My intention now is to not only empower you, but to entertain you as well. And I don't know how to use this thing. So there's the entertaining part. In the hopes that by sharing some of these stories, you too will walk away with a deeper, more resonating reason as to why it might be time for you to pivot intentionally and go after your dreams before an unexpected surprise makes you doing it, kind of like I did 18 months ago. One of the biggest lessons that I learned is that change doesn't have to be massive for it to make an impact. It just needs to happen. Think of it this way. If you start out on a journey and you're off by 1 degree, after about, 100 yards, you're going to be off by 5.2 feet or 2.10 inches. 5.2 feet, which is about this far, which really isn't that much, except if you're playing football, and that can be a real game changer. 5.2 feet. The longer we travel, the worse it gets. After a mile, you're going to be off by 92 feet if you do not course correct that 1 degree of difference. You might end up in the middle of Route 1. If you're flying from San Francisco to Boston, and you're off, the pilot is off by 1 degree at takeoff, and he does not course correct on the way over here, you're going to end up in Rick and Carla's backyard, somewhere near Providence, Rhode Island, which is about 42 miles away from here. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't want any planes landing in his roof. My point is that dealing with any change is about navigating one small shift at a time, so we don't get overwhelmed, so we don't end up in their backyard. We sometimes can find ourselves so far off course, like I did, that it's like I'm on a totally different journey and I didn't even know how I had gotten there. It's about planning the work and then working the plan with strategy and intention, and knowing that that 1 degree of intentional change can possibly have us falling down rabbit holes if we're not careful. This next story is actually a story right out of my book, Chapter 9. It's called Finding Your Something, and this is the entertainment part of the entire evening. It pretty much covers all 4 key parts that I mentioned earlier, but it also talks about how I've met some pretty spectacular people along the way. So before I get started, I'd like to ask another question. Does anybody here have a coach? Nice, nice, nice. Anyone? Soccer coach, life coach, business coach? All right, just a couple. I asked because the next story actually happened because of one of my business coaches, and it's the beginning of my journey, and I thought it would be important to share it with you. For 6 years, I had been so focused on running my interior design firm that I wasn't paying attention to anything else going on around me. At the end of 2016, I ended up so far off course that I unexpectedly had to cram my entire life into a 500 square foot apartment with 1 window overlooking a parking lot within earshot of the highway. The irony of me being a successful interior designer, living in that shithole apartment, really wasn't that bad, but for the story it sounded like it would be good, made me feel like a failure. It made me so concerned that my limiting beliefs had actually won, and I was stuck in that place for over 2 years. I had been working with a business coach, so my business was doing great, but the rest of my life, not so much. Which is why she was actually trying to balance me out just a little bit, and she was desperately trying to get me out of this negative mindset on my personal side of my life. One day, she strongly suggested that I look up Tony Robbins. Does anybody know who Tony Robbins is? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, so it's most of us, but not everybody. For those of you who don't know who Tony Robbins is, I've been on this path for a long time, and I didn't know who he was either, but he's been the most impactful man in my entire life, and he is the #1 personal and professional development leader of all time in the world. So when I looked him up in 2018, I get to his website and it has all these flashy things saying, personal transformation, unleash your driving force, and life-changing results. I did a lot of intentional deliberation. I figured that I really didn't have much else to lose except $1,000 and a long weekend, because the thing was going to be 4 days. So I took a chance on myself and I bought a ticket to one of his events. Day one, oh my God, it was like a frigging rock concert. Tony comes out onto the stage and does his marionette magic like a puppeteer with 14,000 people in a stadium. When he clapped, we clapped. When he screamed, we screamed. When he jumped, we were jumping for just jumping and clapping and screaming for 4 days. He had every single person in that stadium experiencing the reality that life is what we make of it, our choices, not about the cards that we've been dealt. For 4 days, I sat on the edge of my seat listening to Tony and all of his cohorts talk about practical psychology, understanding your limiting beliefs, gee, I wonder where I got that one from, our core values, and oh, here's the other one, driving forces. He touched upon business strategies, communication, relationships, health, wellness. I mean, you name it, Tony talked about it. And if it wasn't him, it was his buddies. He had us brainstorming and writing and writing and writing until our hands cramped. I figured out how to ask better questions that weekend. How can I learn from this? Instead of, why is this happening to me? So then I could get better answers of, well, there are lessons in everything, as opposed to, because you just don't pay enough attention, Mandy. So there was a big difference in how my mindset shifted that weekend. I started to see the difference that 1 degree of uncertainty versus 1 degree of determination could make in the grand scheme of my entire life. And I started to see how all these self-discovery exercises and practices, when done consistently, can unleash a power within ourselves that you just simply cannot ignore. I felt like my entire world had been fully ripped apart and then put together with itty-bitty little pieces like a jigsaw puzzle. And then we'd do it again. We'd rip it back apart again, and then we'd put it back together again, nice and neatly. We danced our asses off. We jumped 10,000 steps a day. I'm not exaggerating by any stretch of the imagination. We laughed until we had cramps in our sides, and we cried. 14,000 people crying for hours. It sounds horrible, but I'm telling you right now, it was amazing. And I started to feel my driving force, the one that I had forgotten about for so long, start to awaken inside again. Around midnight of the first day, Tony told us to leave all of our stuff in the stadium, including our shoes, and to follow him to a park down the street. So We did. 14,000 people traipsing through the streets of Newark, New Jersey in the middle of November, barefoot. You can imagine it, right? Maybe not, because it was 1 o'clock in the morning when we actually got outside. All I could see above me was smog. All I could feel below me was dirt and the scum collecting underneath my feet. And all I could hear around me were these bellows of screams from all the participants being drawn like zombies towards some magical light off in the distance. But we kept going. Oh no. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to keep going with all these people over there. As we entered into a park, I don't even know how long it took us to get there. Mud. I could feel the mud oozing between my toes. It was gross. I didn't even want to look down. I didn't even want to know what it was. But I realized that I needed to let go of my fear and my uncertainty and just give in to what the masses were doing, because it seemed like they knew where they were going. Yes! 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 Chanting, yes! Yeah, for miles. I don't even know what the people around. It was so loud. I got to a point where I couldn't even hear myself think. But then I realized I didn't need to. Because it wasn't my head that was driving me forward anymore. My soul had taken over. And my soul was allowing me to be drawn by this enchanted crowd towards the reason I had gone there in the first place. And what I could actually now see were rows of fire. That's what that magical light in the distance was. There was an innate understanding amongst all of these people that I hadn't known 24 hours earlier, but were now all my best friends. We were all there to change. We were all there to break through our limiting beliefs, and we were all there to discover our driving force. When it was my turn, I advanced to the front of the line, and the heat from the fire defrosted my mud-coated toes. And standing in the middle between darkness and light, amidst the roars of encouragement, 14,000 people still screaming in the middle of the night, still going, still going, still going, I paused and I looked up at the sky. A few twinkly stars were shining down on me. And for a split second, I heard absolutely nothing, but I felt everything. That silence surrounded me with a blanket of peace, and I suddenly felt whole, complete, and perfect. I took a giant breath in, and I looked forward, and I said, I'm going for it. I walked the 30 feet across those flaming coals like my life depended on it, because afterwards I realized it actually did. When I reached the end, the pit crew rinsed my feet because, you can burn yourself when you're walking on fire. It's kind of hot. And I started celebrating with all of my fellow firewalkers with more jumping, more screaming, and so much more fun. There was emotion everywhere. Everybody was having an amazing time. And I actually learned that by surrounding myself with the right people, like it feels like we all have this evening, you can naturally face your fears, and you don't have to do it alone. It was one of the most outrageous nights of my entire life. There was no drugs, no alcohol. It was just pure adrenaline and the force of thousands of people energizing the path that I was about to walk on and figure out exactly who I was. My soul was awakened that night. And I knew within those 4 full days that I changed. It was just a matter of putting myself in the right place, surrounding myself with the right people, and shifting my mindset towards a brighter future. Believing in yourself isn't always easy, but it is possible. You don't have to go to a Tony Robbins event to figure all this stuff out, although if anybody has the opportunity to, I highly recommend it because they're so awesome. I invite you to be courageous and believe in yourself right now, tonight, and be curious enough to figure out what your driving force is so you can harness the energy of intentional change, one decision at a time. Because what I've discovered is that when we stop allowing our limiting beliefs to run the show, it's just a matter of learning how to let go of who you might become and start holding on to the belief that you can be anybody you want. Since that event in 2018, I have attended 8 more live in-person events, 20 more virtual events. I know this sounds ridiculous because these events are 4, 5, 6, or 7 days long. But within all of that, I've accumulated a vast library of resources that I'm going to share with you tonight with a QR code. So get your phones ready if you're interested. And the reason why I'm sharing all of these resources with you, that I've paid thousands of dollars to accumulate over the last 6 or 7 years, is because I want you to go home feeling empowered. I want you to go home with something. So you have options like I did not some 6 or 7 years ago. And you can make different choices that will lead you down better avenues, closer to your path of true fulfillment and your greatest dreams. One of the greatest things that I learned over the past decade is the value of a coach. The coach who introduced me to Tony Robbins, she believed in me more than I believed in myself. And it was because of her that I was able to go to this event and start shifting the way I knew I needed to. In fact, it was my coaches, because I have more than one, I actually have like 3, maybe 4, that reminded me of all of these resources when I was going through hell 18 months ago, and helped me to understand that the chaos with that client and the drama with that boyfriend wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me. It was happening for me so I could pivot away from a path that was no longer serving me in a way that I could no longer perform, onto a path that I've been able to find significance and true fulfillment, and where I now get to serve all of you. It was my coach that helped me design my step-by-step strategy to get over the bullshit and get on with my life. Because sometimes you need a little push. Somebody just needs to go, come on, Amanda, let's do this. I hired a coach when I was writing my book. I hired a coach when I was practicing for this speech. I hired a coach to strategize business plans, to work out, figure out my diet, all the things. There's coaches out there for everything. The overarching point that I'm trying to make here is that having a coach, they can help you roll out the red carpet to whatever your dreams may actually be and change your story, one sentence, one word at a time. Here's a quick recap, because I did talk about a lot, and I've been entertaining you. I haven't been able to see everybody all night long. So I started with understanding your limiting beliefs, and there's little kind of cheat sheets in the book that'll help you figure out what they may be. Then it's about awakening your driving force. What are you passionate about? I want you to figure that out and lean into it. How can you get more of that? Don't forget to pause along the way to make sure that you're actually staying on the right course. Because when you put all of this together, you can really embrace the opportunity of change that's happening all around us all the time. We just need to pay attention to it a little bit more. Sometimes when we pause before an unexpected surprise happens. Here's the QR code, if anybody would be interested in a resource list. You may be thinking, what are your next steps? Well, first of all, take a picture of the QR code, because like I said, there's a lot of resources. I will be updating it. Links to different events, links to different articles that relate to some of the stories in the book, the coaches that I've used. And I promise, oh, and the second thing that you can do, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but my book's for sale. And even if you're not into all this empowerment stuff and self-discovery stuff, there's some really good stories and some shenanigans going on in here that just might entertain you. So here's the little surprise. Who here has a blue bracelet on? Thank you, Molly. If you guys can look on the inside of the dark part, if anybody has a 954, which are my favorite angel numbers, we can talk about that later. Does anybody have a 954 on there? 954 going once. Molly, of course. Holly, I'm so sorry. That's okay. I'll call you Molly for the rest of your life. I think you might have. All right, you guys both get a book. Now, does anybody else have a bracelet that has the words 229 listed underneath it? Bueller? Bueller? Do you? No 229s out there? All right, well, you'll just have to follow me around and I'll be able to give it away to you next time. But before we leave, I'm going to run you through a quick visualization exercise. So I'd like to invite you all to close your eyes. Take a deep breath and let go of any of the noise in your mind and allow your heart to relax. Let the work stress and any frustrations you brought with you tonight, just let it go and breathe into the peace of being present. I want you to know that you are so very appreciated. You are respected and you are very loved. I need you to remember how powerful you are, regardless of any limiting beliefs that you may have brought up tonight while I was talking to you about mine. And whatever you're facing right now is happening for you, not to you. Now take another deep breath and think about the greatest dream that you've ever wanted. Is it to be financially abundant and travel the world? Maybe own your own company someday. Or maybe your dream is to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or simply just fall in love and live happily ever after. Think about what's holding you back. What needs to change right now for you to just make one simple shift to get a little bit closer to that dream? What action do you need to take to get a little bit closer? Now I want you to travel through time with me. 6 months, a year, maybe 5. And imagine yourself there. You're taking that traveling trip around the entire world. You own that business. You are at the top of that mountain and you are so in love. How does that feel? What does it look like? Who's with you? How full is your heart right now? Imagine the sense of pride that you actually did it. You took a couple steps forward and you reached your goal. You did it. The overflowing joy in your heart right now must be amazing and you feel unstoppable. And I want you to take another breath and feel the energy that's just flowing through your body right now and how good that really feels. This is the power of embracing a mindset that accepts change and does not allow fear or limiting beliefs to get in the way. This is how you start to harness the energy of change and leap forward by doing the work and staying the course. Look at you. You're on top of the world. So in love. I'd like for you to take one more deep breath and then open your eyes. When you want to. You can open your eyes whenever you want to. The energy in this room has changed. It's not just changed inside of you, it's changed because of all of you. In your mind, you all just saw yourself reaching your greatest dreams, and it changed the energy around us. So I would like to celebrate with everybody together, and I would love for you to raise your arm again, just real quick. Turn around and bend it real quick and pat yourself on the back. Nice job. I'm so honored to have been a part of your first step in your visualization towards your greatest dreams. And I am so thankful for NKBA for allowing me to be here this evening. And I am so, so grateful that I've been able to meet you all for the first time, and I hope to continue to see you on your journeys moving forward. Thank you very much.